Now, as far as I'm concerned, the mark of a good garden is one that's going to have color and interest through the whole of the year. And if you're looking for a very colorful evergreen that doesn't grow too big, that will give you bright colorful foliage regardless of what the weather conditions brings, and it has this lovely bright golden foliage, then let me introduce you to Chamaecyparis Vintage Gold. For here's a little kind of flat-topped rounded mound plant that will get to about maybe short of 3 foot high and spreads out a little wider than that, maybe to about 3 to 4 foot wide. And when I zoom in closely here, you'll see that it has this lovely kind of ferny textured foliage, which means that it adds considerably to the overall effect. It's a plant that was easy to grow in average garden soils. Just make sure that it's free draining. I would suggest that you plant this in a sunny spot, because then you're going to get better color on the foliage. But it will tolerate and grow in partially shaded conditions too. And you'll see here when I zoom in on this part that in shadier spots the foliage is going to take on more of a greenish color, whereas when it's out in full sunlight you get this really beautiful bright golden yellow. Now, what's interesting about this plant is that it turned up as a sport in Painesville, Ohio. Greg Stokely, who ran Seven Springs Nursery at that time, was walking through an area where he was growing some Chamaecyparis gold mops, one of the most popular golden varieties. In fact, it's a threadleaf variety of cypress, when he noticed that one of the plants was distinctly different. And then when he looked at it closer, he noticed that it had this really lovely effect with its foliage. And then he said he grew it on for some years and watched it closer, and as he did so, it just seemed to get better and better. And then he said to me that it's like a good wine. As it ages, it gets better and better, and that's why he called it vintage gold. So here's a plant that you could put in as a single specimen in a bed or a border, perhaps a raised bed, or even in a rockery. It's a lovely plant to put into a container if you're looking for something that will give you bright, cheery color throughout the year. Then of course you could use this foliage, though of course the roots would have to be protected during the worst of the winter time, because if it's in a container the roots are going to freeze. So you're going to have to think about that. But certainly to pop into a seasonal container in early spring, you can be sure that it's going to give you all of this bright, cheery color. But for me, probably one of the nicest effects with this would be to plant it in a mass grouping. That might mean a group of 3 or maybe 5 or 7 plants, just informally arranged, very nice on a bank or just as a drift of ground cover, or perhaps even for lining pathways and driveways. There's no end of possibilities that you could think of to use this really very, very beautiful and highly attractive little dwarf slow-growing evergreen. And just like a lot of evergreens, you'll find that this trims very well too. So you could go in early spring and you could just give this a little light trim, keep out to the young fresh growth, and you'll be able to retain it into a short compact mound too, if that's what you want to do. So all in all, a really beautiful, highly colorful and very interesting textural effect shrub that I think you'll enjoy growing. This is Chamaecyparis Vintage Gold, a really nice little plant that I think you should consider getting.